The Maverick. Chapter 1. He stared out the window into the expanse of icy white snow, and watched the flakes drift down onto the frozen earth. The calm of the world outside the window was more dead in its quietness than living. It seemed as if all the world had gone to sleep, and the flowing flakes were the sole living things whose motion emitted a song that was a lullaby of death, a song that caressed the chaotic blurs of death inside him. He stared, not blinking, lost. He let out the breath he realized he had been holding, forming a circle of mist on the glass. He sighed and turned, walked up to his bed, and fell face upon it. He stared up at the ceiling and waited as the blur of memories engulfed his troubled mind. Rage, fear, and chaos ripped through him. He closed his eyes. A lone tear peeped out from under his lashes and streaked its way down his hairline until it hid behind his ear. A sudden commotion outside the door brought him back from his reverie. He sat up, dazed. The door knocked again. He rubbed the tears away with the back of his hand and hated himself for it. "Come in," he droned. "Glad to see you are up," his mother said, storming into the room, sounding tired. "I've been up for some time now," he said matter-of-factly. His mother, who'd been working her way around the room, picking up his scattered clothes, probably looking for something to put into the laundry, whipped her head around, a shocked expression on her face. "You could have come out of your mole-hole here and helped me out with the chores, you know. I can't manage it all on my own," she said incredulously, her eyes still wide. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize. What is it you want me to do?" he asked, his voice bland. "That's it, isn't it?" his mother said, her voice edgy with inflicted rage and hurt. "That's all I can ever get from the both of you. Sorry," she declared, inching towards hysteria. A searing heat shot up the base of his head and concentrated itself in his eyes, and they shot up to glare at his mother. His lips sealed together until he forgot he had a mouth, and all he could do was stare, unblinking. "Don't you dare glare at me like that, you ill-mannered, unworthy, insolent mongrel!" she finally screamed. He shifted his eyes away in disgust, and saw his 8-year-old sister hiding behind the doorframe, staring at him with huge tears in her big, frightened eyes. Next came the hurried footsteps of his younger brother, his glasses set perfectly on the bridge of his crooked nose, and his nerdy face fell shaking into a bored, exasperated expression, as if telling him there wasn't anything he could possibly do right. His eyes still burning with rage and hatred, he pushed his way past them and strode down the stairs and out the door, all the time hearing his brother trying to soothe their raving and cursing mother. He shut the door a lot harder than necessary and stalked down the street, leaving a new trail of profanities in his wake. She stared up into the dark, starry sky, looking beyond the reality of its existence into the fantasy of its beauty, and a soft smile crossed her lips as she thought of the irony that its being there presented, the stark idea of the presence of the unreal in that which was so inevitably real. She sighed, and wondered if a world existed where each man meaning to bring some good to this world, could just make the iniquitous lot do the right thing, without force or vehemency or wars. She chuckled at her own wistful thinking. She looked down at her watch and decided it was getting late. It was her first day at college tomorrow. Not that she expected it to be anything extraordinary from what her everyday was, but she'd hate ending up being late or even drowsy for her first class. He kicked the brick into place that had been jutting precariously out of the wall of an old building in the alley he had been trudging along. He looked around, up and down the dark alley, saw the cars moving on the street up ahead, and realized he didn't know where he was. He sighed. He didn't want to walk onto the street anyway, so he started back up the way he'd come. Suddenly there were loud screeches and a great bang of crunching metal that sounded unreal, as two cars collided on the street behind him. Before he could even register the circumstances around him, his mind plunged into a dark abyss where surreal screams and blasts burst through until they overpowered his consciousness, and strong convulsions ripped through his entire body. He fell to the ground, unconscious, as jagged contractions raved through his body. Now was the best time, she mused silently. He was weak, and oh, so vulnerable. And the powers that were brewing within him, he was so well aware of. His soul was drenched in the scorching heat of regret, denial, sorrow. She could already feel his rage, the power it would unleash within her, as his soul, with all its hatred and intense destructive forces, merged with hers. Oh, how she thirsted for it! How it could change everything! Mistress, she snapped out of her reverie, and her eyes flew open. Doltus gasped. It had almost been 10 years, but the changing hues of the mistress's eyes as she returned from her onward visit to the real world, where she connected with her praise, or predated anew, still struck to the core of his soul. But that was probably just because his soul was entirely hers, under her control for all eternity. He floated soundlessly towards her and stood a little way from where she sat. She was beautiful. No, she did not possess the sort of beauty that is accompanied with an idealized sense of innocence and pretty. Her beauty was not angelic, but demonic, and breathless, ageless. Not that age and time mattered in this realm. The mortal have been readied for the ritual, mistress. She sounds bored, he realized with a start. She is never bored, and she performs the rituals. After all, they were the food for her hunger, the blood for her thirst. Yet this... Was it that she had found something or somebody interesting enough to rob her of her interest in something as dear to her as the reaping of souls? Or was it that she had found that which had ignited in her the craving for something greater? The mistress rose from the spot she had been meditating at. A flurry of butterflies rose with her, a dark, sinister blur of black, that scattered around her into the dark skies with its ascent. Doltus crouched down in fear to avoid touching them. These were the divine guides that guided the mistress through the countless dimensions to reach the real world. What dimension they were existing in was knowledge beyond his jurisdiction. He was, after all, only but a slave. The bleak clouds overhead rumbled. Doltus started and looked up to see the mistress cross the threshold of the garden the garden of the dead. This was a nursery where flowers of the most peculiar sort and form grew, and yet they were beautiful, the same way their creator was, hexing with a darkness that fascinated the soul. He had never come across anything that could rival the bewitchery cast by this mere vegetation. Not in all the while he was human, that is. They were grown and cared for by the mistress herself. She cherished them. He had often seen her in quiet dialogue with the blossoms, stroking their petals tenderly, all the while whispering, as if to a lover, and the enchanting vegetation would rustle soundlessly in the air. What the delicacy and charm enshrouded was a reality uglier than death. The flowers fed on human corpses that the mistress had her slaves bring in from the real world, and so they hounded the cemeteries at night. They were, however, forbidden to bring back any living being for this purpose. Doltus did not know why the mistress made that exception. Yet, to follow and obey her every command, and to fulfill her every demand, was the sole function of their existence, and Doltus was determined to do just that. After all, she had granted him a new life and a new power, a power that made him invincible and supremely superior to the weak and tormented mortal humans. The loss of freedom was an insignificant price to pay, compared to what he had been offered, and that which he had acquired. He was indebted to her for all eternity, and was gladly so. Follow Chapter 2 in the next video upload on Sunday, September 24th, 2011. Thank you.